What is going on today? I'm going to be talking about the few problems that we've been solving inside of the Fast Track Coaching Program and Mastermind over the last couple of months. And I love it. I love the Fast Track Program. Don't get me wrong. I love the UIG. I mean, Lucas and I started building this thing about 4.5 years ago, which is crazy to think about and say out loud. But yeah, 4.5 years ago, we started building out the UIG with a massive vision of what we wanted to build, of the impact that we wanted to create, to basically put together a very accessible course and playbook for how to learn, master the skill sets of DeFi and actually produce a cash flowing vehicle or an investment system that allows you to be in position to experience and what I think is one of the greatest opportunities in our lifetimes. And so the UIG is exactly what I wish I had when I first got started. Yet the vision that we have for the UIG is so massive that when I look at what we currently have, I'm like, yeah, this is good, but it's like a blip on the radar of what we're trying to build and the software that we're trying to create and all of that. So just stay tuned. That's all I got to say. You're still here on the ground level. Just stay tuned to what we got planned, especially here in Q1 of 2026. I think you'll be kind of blown away as we start to release some of the things we've been working on behind the scenes. But with that being said, I love the UIG, but the Fast Track program, it really does take things to the next level. And what I mean by that is that, actually, I'll give it some context. I am a coach at heart. I am an educator at heart. My whole family is teachers. My parents are teachers. My grandparents were teachers. My uncle is a high school math teacher. My cousin is a teacher. It's like in my blood, honestly. Like, it's in my blood to teach and to coach and to serve and help people. And the Fast Track program allows me to do that on such a deep level that I thoroughly enjoy when I have my open office hour calls or when I'm presenting on a mastermind call. Like, I have a Fast Track mastermind call tomorrow that I'm going to be hosting with Angie. Actually, she's going to be presenting her Russian doll strategy. But that's beside the point. I get to coach and teach and educate and to work with and collaborate with other team members as well as other Fast Track members and investors who are there trying to take things to the next level ultimately, right? And so anyways, let's just dive straight into the value of what I put together for you today. They're not necessarily problems. I think that's just a way for me to get your attention. They're not necessarily problems. It's really just like, what do we do in Fast Track that really separates it from either the UIG or from other things out there that allow you to get the support, the personalized, attention that you may need to take things to the next level. And so for the first thing that I have here is a problem that we really try to solve in Fast Track. And what we do on open office hour calls specifically is helping you get clarity on establishing your plan, right? So I talk a lot about building a Miro board. I talk about it consistently through the quests and the UIG. And it's not just about, discovering a strategy and then deploying capital into said strategy. What I mean by a business plan is establishing what your goals are, what your targets are, and then ultimately, it's not even just goals and targets. It's about what you value. And I'm going to talk about this is like super, super valuable. And I really hope you're paying attention to this. If I have 5 Fast Track members on an open office hour call, and I'll use BMAC as an example. I'll use some folks that are in the Fast Track program because they're always on my mind here. BMAC, right? When BMAC asks me a question, I know exactly what BMAC is trying to do. I know his goals. I know his targets. I know what he values, which in my opinion is one of the most important things. And what I mean by values, it is the thing that you care most about. And so a couple of those values might be something like on the lines of capital preservation, maintaining the dollar value of your portfolio. Right? That's capital preservation. Or I value cash flow. I value producing consistent cash flow week over week, month over month. I value price appreciation. And when assets in the market moves up, I want to experience that growth. All of these are examples of different things that folks can value. And we put that on a scale of how much do you value this thing? Because there's sort of, depending on the strategy and depending on the plan that you're putting together, there is kind of give and take with those different values, right? You can maximize price appreciation, but you might sacrifice a little bit of cash flow. Or you can absolutely maximize the cash flow, but you might give up a little capital preservation. Or you can do a combination of both where you really value capital preservation and cash flow, but you kind of have to sacrifice price appreciation. I'm using this as just example to get your mind thinking that this is not just about executing a strategy. It's not saying, oh, I really like the treasury flywheel, and then putting capital in and saying, okay, I'm done, right? There is so much more to this. There's so much nuance to this, especially as the market fluctuates. Right, as I'm speaking right now, Bitcoin's back to 92,000, 92.5. Ethereum's back over 3,200. Solana's just about touching 140. Like, these are, the market has pushed upwards, right? And so it feels really good. And I think that what we do really well in Fast Track is helping folks, again, get clarity on the business plan for not only when markets are moving up, but what happens when they're moving sideways, and then especially when markets are moving down. And that's actually a bonus thing that I have in here is really helping folks get clear on what it looks like to have hedges in place. Actually, I'll skip right to it. Let's just bounce around, right? Let's just bounce around instead of going one by one. And I was going to talk about this at the end, but I think it'll be valuable to talk about here is when the market is going sideways or going up, it's really easy. DeFi in crypto investing is so easy. In fact, when the markets are ripping to the upside, it's kind of hard to miss, right? It's like it becomes super easy. Everybody on Twitter, everybody on YouTube, everybody in the UIG and other communities and other things out there, it's like you can't not win when the market is ripping to the upside. But what happens when the market starts to pull back? That's where it weeds out a lot of people. And the people that were speculative investors and kind of gamblers, if you will, that's where they really get hurt. And so as a Fast Track member, as a Fast Track investor, it is how do we implement hedges? How do we implement bear market strategies, potentially like the Sentinel or the insurance policy is one that folks have really been loving, where we can implement and we can execute on taking on short deltas to help protect and preserve the value of our portfolio. So I'll give you an example. If you have a wrapped ETH USDC liquidity pool position, that's a long vehicle, right? So if ETH goes sideways or it moves up, that vehicle is going to be a good vehicle, right? You'll see a little bit of price appreciation, and you'll definitely be earning some cash flow. But when the market pulls back and ETH drops in value, and we go out of range to the downside, now we have decisions to make. Do we rebalance down? Do we snuggle rebalance down? Do we sit and wait? Do we exit completely? And all of those decisions are really challenging to make when the market's pulling back and emotions are, is pulling back, emotions are high, and things can be, it feels challenging to manage. Well, our mission in Fast Track, and especially in the last several months, is helping folks really internalize and understand the fundamentals and the foundations of actually implementing hedges, right? And I use this very simple analogy, and you might enjoy it, and maybe you've heard it before, but I talk about if you own a property, let's say you own let's say you own a duplex, and let's say you live in Arizona, right? You own an Arizona. No, Arizona's a bad one because I don't think they get floods because they use floods as an example. Let's say Florida, right? You own a duplex in Florida, and everything is good. When the sun is shining and everything is happy, people are paying rent, you're earning cash flow, right? I'm using the analogy of a duplex with a liquidity pool here. Everything is good when the sun is shining. But when the storm comes and a hurricane starts to roll in and floods start to come, well, that value of the property is going to hurt. And if there is such a bad hurricane that people are vacating from the premises, meaning they are no longer paying rent, and the value of your property drops, it's the very same to when the market pulls back and you're out of range. So when you're out of range, you've stopped earning fees, so you're no longer earning rent, if you will, and the value of the property is going down as well, right? And so it's not a great feeling when the market pulls back and there's a hurricane and there's floods going on when you don't have an insurance in place. And so what we've been working with Fast Track folks on is really implementing that piece, understanding, okay, when I recognize that there might be a flood, when there might be, not even a flood, when there might be heavy rain coming in, the ability for us to pivot and to shift our strategies just a little bit to include hedges or to include an insurance policy, it allows us to sleep good at night knowing, hey, if the storm does come and floods come and my property gets hurt and damaged, it's okay because I have an insurance policy that can sort of bail me out. It's a way to, again, to protect ourselves to the downside. And so I think it's... I hesitate to say this, but I will say it. I think it's a mandatory skill set for us to be able to implement hedges successfully, implement insurance policies, or even just put together straight up bear market strategies so that when the market transitions and the structure breaks and we start to move down, that we can just very easily and very simply just shift our strategies around to protect against that. Okay. Something that I'm doing is doing both. I'm doing some long strategies and I'm doing some short strategies or bear market strategies, even though I don't think we're in a bear market. I just think, I use those strategies to help me produce cash flow and helps me preserve capital a little bit better when the market starts to pull back. So, anyways, I'm long-winded with my explanations here. All I'm trying to show you and explain is that in Fast Track, and in the UIG, it's all in the UIG, but in Fast Track specifically, it's about implementing specific strategies, implementing specific things into your operation, into your system, where you can confidently deploy and manage said position, right? I've mentioned this to our team a few times, and we're working on and improving this, but I think what we don't do very well in the UIG is show folks how to manage positions, right? Because we can open up these positions, we can understand the strategies really, really well. But when it comes to actually managing the positions, as time moves on, prices are going to move up, they're going to move down, you're going to go out of range, your stop loss is going to be hit. Things are going to happen as time goes on, especially in the volatile market in crypto. How do we manage the positions? What do we look for? What do we look for when making those decisions? And one of the key parts that I try to embark on folks, in the Fast Track program is having game plans for different situations ahead of time, right? So what I mean by that is if you were to open up a liquidity pool position, let's keep it super simple, open up a wrapped ETH USDC liquidity pool position, what happens when the price moves up and you go out of range and you're fully converted to USDC? What do you do? Again, it goes back to what are your goals, what are your targets, and then what do you value? If you value cash flow above all else, then a rebalance is in order, right? Because you need to be producing cash flow again. If you value capital preservation, you might make a different decision, right? If you value price appreciation, you might be doing something different, right? You may not just be straight up in that liquidity pool straight up. You might be lending ETH first and then borrowing against it to deploy in liquidity pools, because by putting it directly into a liquidity pool, you're sort of capping yourself on the price appreciation. So anyways, all I'm trying to communicate here is that you can have all the strategies in the world. You can have it all laid out and say, here are the 15 different strategies. But when it comes to Fast Track, what we do is we take all of that, we take your goals, we take your targets, we take what you're trying to do, what you value, and then put together and help you put together a game plan so that you can execute confidently. And that's what I wanted to do in number 3 here, was just explain that confidence is way more important than you may think. Because the crypto market moves so dang fast that it can be hard to keep up with, right? Especially when, markets are ripping to the upside. It's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Okay, markets are ripping to the downside and they're pulling back. Well, what do I do here? And if you don't have confidence in your game plan, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have confidence to click the buttons and actually make those decisions, it's all kind of for naught, to be honest with you, right? And so what I like to do in Fast Track is to make sure that folks not only just understand it, but that they feel really confident with managing said positions, okay? I'm trying to think of an example. Colleen's somebody who comes to mind. Colleen's been working with me for many, many months now. And she mentioned on a recent open office hour call that she's finally getting confident in the insurance policy, which is not only because she values cash flow, to kind of use her an example, she really values cash flow above price appreciation. She cares for that, but not as much as cash flow. And so with her, I know her system, I know her plan, I know what she's trying to achieve. And when she's deploying into a wrapped ETH USDC liquidity pool, she wants to preserve that capital best way she can, right? And so if the market pulls back and she doesn't have any insurance on, it can get kind of ugly kind of fast. And so she values cash flow and capital preservation. And so when I showed her the insurance policy, she was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is great. Let me put it into action. And over a few weeks, I could see her getting more confident with the management of it. And she was actually explaining on an open office hour call with me that she's like, I get it. If it's finally clicking now where I am able to deploy capital, have that insurance policy on to protect myself to the downside, and manage this position so that I continuously produce cash flow. And what she's been doing is she's been testing what happens if I go a little bit tighter on my ranges. Well, what happens if I go a little over collateralized? What happens if I do a little bit more leverage? What happens when the market pulls up? How does that affect the short arm? There's a lot of nuance and things that go into this. And I appreciate her for sharing that, for saying, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm trying to build. This is what I value. These are my goals. Okay, and then I gave her the strategy. Okay, now she's deploying the strategy, she's testing it and learning from it, and then coming back into the group and sharing it. So now when there's a dozen other people on that call, they're soaking it in, and now they can take that information and that knowledge and implement it in their systems based on what she was sharing about hers. So anyways, I love this. I love our program. I like the collaboration. The collaboration. That's what I really like about Fast Track, because I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room. I know that. So I like to ask questions. I like to probe. I like to get, more information, more details from folks as they're presenting on what they're building and what they're trying to do. Because there's been dozens of times where I've went, that's a great idea. I'm taking that, and then I'll implement it into my system and I'll be like, that was amazing. However, this part didn't really work for me. Bring it back to the group, and now we can tinker, and play around with it. Chris is another fella. Chris was saying, he's like, what I really like about this? I like that it's called Crypto Labs. And he mentioned that. He's like, I like that it's called Crypto Labs, because I feel like when we're in these Zoom rooms on Fast Track, it's like we're tinkering. We're like, taking the different formulas and we're kind of putting it all together, and we're testing things. It's like a true lab. It's a testing environment. And so, anyways, I'm kind of going off topic and I'm talking a lot, but hopefully the discussion and things that I'm talking about are making sense and are providing some good clarity on what the Fast Track program is all about. It's about building a game plan. It's about confidently deploying capital into said game plan and actually managing that position in a way that aligns with what you're trying to achieve. And the second one, because I've been bouncing all around, which is sort of how I like to do things, is setting proper allocations based on risk. I added that in because I think that's important as well. Actually, Angie, I want to give Angie credit. Angie is one that brings this up very often, and it's allocations, right? It is looking at your entire system, your entire portfolio, not just individual pieces, not just looking at this one liquidity pool or this one treasury position or this one lending and borrowing position. It is looking at the entire system, looking at your entire operation, and like zooming out and then just seeing how the chess pieces are playing, right? Kind of make sure that all of them are either, they're working together in collaboration, but then also making sure that they're allocated properly. And again, it's something that she brings up often on our mastermind calls, and as well as our open office hour calls, is helping folks set proper allocations based on the risk profile that they have. So if I'm working with somebody, let's say I'm working with John, and John's a great guy, by the way. If you haven't met him, John Adam is who I'm referring to right now. He's a great guy who just comes to my mind because he is somebody that is so dang active in the community, and it does a great job of talking through his system, right? He talks about his strategy. He talks about the different, positions that he has. And I just remember very vaguely, it was several weeks ago, but I vaguely remember the conversation about allocation and like how he sees the different pieces of his portfolio all kind of coming together. And again, what Angie likes to talk about too is the risk aspect of it. If we're over allocated in a very risky position, or very, a much more heavy, risk adjusted, I'm not saying it well here. If we're over allocated in a position that has more risk than we're comfortable with, it throws off the whole feng shui of the entire portfolio. And so again, what Angie does really well is brings us back to reality, brings us back to ground level, and says, okay, hey, there's a really cool opportunity over here. There's lots of, there's a big opportunity for us to capitalize on this. However, make sure that you're allocated properly. And that looks different for every single person. So, give one more example here. There was a gentleman who joined Fast Track. This was a long time ago. It must have been 6, 7, 8 months ago. And he asked me a question on one of the calls, and I couldn't answer it, right? He said, Colin, what's like the ideal allocation for a portfolio? Like, how much should you have in treasury versus bull run bag versus, versus cash flowing liquidity pools? Like, what is the proper allocation that I should be doing? And I said, honestly, look around, look at the 8 other people in this room right now. Every single person is going to answer that question different. So it's very challenging for me just to give you a blanket answer here and just say, hey, do 50% in your treasury, 20% in your bull run bag, and 30% in your cash flow vehicles. Because somebody like BMAC may pay more attention and care more about the cash flow. So he might be more heavily allocated into LPs. Or what's somebody else here? Yuri might be more heavily allocated into his treasury bag because he wants price appreciation for the long term. So every person in that room is going to have a slightly different, or maybe even drastically different way of how they're allocating their portfolio. And so what I like about Fast Track is we get to have that conversation, and I get to work into mold into kind of create an allocation based on the risk, based again on the targets and on the goals that they have set, and based on what they value, because the values dictate the allocation. And again, you can have 3 people all present their portfolios. All of them have drastically different allocations, and all of them be exactly in alignment with what they're trying to achieve. And so I really dislike when there are people out there saying, like, this is the allocation that you should be doing, like a cookie cutter, like this is what you should be doing and this is how you should set it up. Because again, we all have different goals. We all have value different things. We all want different things as we're operating and managing this, that it doesn't make sense to have a cookie cutter allocation. We used to have that in the UIG, and I removed it because I'm like, it just doesn't fit. It's completely personal. It has to be completely personalized here. You can't just put a cookie cutter allocation chart out there and say, yeah, just follow this. Right? We can give you a starting place, but all of it's going to be dictated again on what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so longer video than I anticipated, but that's sort of how I roll. I'm just going to kind of summarize real quick, right? Fast Track's my favorite program because of the personalization aspect of it. We get to help you build clarity, help you build out your business plan, your Miro board. I'm a visual guy, and so I really encourage folks to build out the Miro board, build out the visual map of your goals, your systems, your strategies, your tracking sheets. Have it all in front of you there, because it's really easy when you come into one of my open office hour calls and you say, Colin, I have a question about this, and I'm making a decision about that. It's like, yeah, show me your board. Show me your Miro board. I want to see visually what you're working on so that we can move the chess pieces around to make those decisions. So anyways, that's what we do, number 1. Number 2, properly allocate, right? We like to look at your risk profile. We like to look at, what your values are, what your goals are, and then make sure that you're properly and in alignment allocating the capital into the areas of your portfolio that make the most sense. Okay, all that's it's gonna look very different for every single person that walks through the doors, but that's what we do in Fast Track. That's why I like it. It's personalized. Okay. Number 3, deploying capital with confidence. This is like putting capital into the system. So once you have the system built, once the operation is going, and once you've tested it fully, now we just increase capital. Right? We increase the deployment of the money that we have, because if we have a solid system, and if we have a game plan for if the market does that, we do this. If the market is that, we do this. If we have all of that kind of mapped out, then you should have confidence with deploying it. So now as you do it, it's super scalable, right? And what I love about DeFi is that it is scalable. Scalable up, scalable down. So if you're having a system that works really well for you, if you just add more capital, you can keep producing those same results. But if you're not deploying it with confidence, then you're gonna kind of self-sabotage yourself, as you try to scale this thing. So building confidence early and in test positions, just like I was talking about with Colleen, it's really easy to then scale up from there. Okay, and that's what we try to help you do in Fast Track. And number 4 was a little bit of a bonus. I talked about it first because I got too excited. But number 4 is basically just implementing bear market strategies and hedges. It's a mandatory skill set to start to learn, because everything we do is a long vehicle focused, right? Meaning our bull run bags, our treasury, our liquidity pools, our liquid staking, our vaults, everything that we do in UIG and in DeFi here, it's all long vehicles. Meaning when the market pulls back, we're going to experience a decline in the value of our entire system. And so implementing hedges and other bear market strategies allow us to continue to produce cash flow, throughout any market condition. And that's a big skill set to have, especially if cash flow is your main mission, or if capital preservation is something you truly value. So that's really what we've been focusing on in the last several months, is taking the insurance policy, taking the hedges, taking the Sentinel strategy, and actually implementing that successfully, so that when the time comes and you actually are a little bit more bearish, you can very simply just switch into that with confidence, as opposed to trying to, what's that saying? It's like trying to, build the parachute on the way down kind of a thing. We don't want that to happen. We want the game plans for all market conditions to be there in front of you on your Miro board. And then as the market dictates, you just transition into each one. So again, longer video than I anticipated. Hopefully it's brought you value. If you have any questions at all about anything I talked about, don't hesitate to just send me a message. If you're thinking about Fast Track, honestly, again, it's my favorite thing that I do because of the coaching aspect and the collaboration. I said it before, I'll say it again. The ability for myself to get around high level DeFi investors, and heck, I'm asking questions. I'm like, how are you managing that? What are you doing about this? How are you doing that? And as people are talking about their portfolios and their positions, I'm taking notes, I'm learning, and I'm implementing that into what I'm doing. And so the collaboration aspect is something that I think everybody in Fast Track can attest to. And so anyways, not to talk about that too much. If you're interested in Fast Track or you want to explore it, you want to learn more about it, again, just shoot me a message. Just say, hey, I'm interested in Fast Track. Talk to me about what it is, what's the structure, how does it work, how do I get support, what's the dealio with it, and I can certainly walk you through it. But the essence of what I talked about today is the core of it. It's building a game plan, helping you allocate properly, deploying capital with confidence, and just making sure we have a system set up for every market condition so that, again, as the market shifts and changes, we just roll into that strategy or that adjustment that we can make as we go forward. So again, hopefully this brought you value. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to send me a message. And with that being said, we'll see you real soon. Peace.